Hello and welcome to Impera Project, a project built on a dream. If you lived in a communist country, you've probably heard stories from your grandparents or parents about the so-called 5-year plans. As their name suggests, these plans were a series of rapid industrializations over a span of 5 years, meant to further improve the communist agenda and increase the development of different important economic sectors. They consisted of a target meant to be achieved, but the target itself was mostly unrealistic, and many people, especially from the agricultural sector, were forced to lie about the quantity of the production. The punishments for not meeting the targets were extremely brutal, and the communist authorities were ready to take everything from harvest if the target was not met. Lying in the official documents was rampant, because nobody wanted to starve to death. So at the end of the day, the 5 years plans were achieved faster on paper while not at all reflecting reality. Every production cycle was a record, yet there was never enough food. This is called market-Stalinism.
De ianuarie în București. Anul 1953. Anul hotărător pentru realizarea cincinalului în 4 ani.
Okidoki, you might say, but today we do not have to worry about it. Some countries never experienced the bureaucratic nightmare full of lies on paper. Is it truly so? Today we are going to talk about the concept of market-Stalinism, which, as unbelievable as it seems, it is extremely prevalent in our late capitalist societies. We will use as a source for documentation the book Capitalist Realism by Mark Fisher. But before we start this video, we would appreciate it if you'd press that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, leave a like and comment if you enjoy our work. We've noticed that only a small minority of you who attend our video lectures actually decide to remain. We would love to have you as a part of our community. Thank you for your time. Now, without any further ado, let's get started. In chapter 6 of his book Capitalist Realism, Mark Fisher explains how the bureaucratic nightmare of the communist ruling systems, which capitalism vowed to abolish, is now even more prevalent than it was in the USSR, for example. It seems strange, but this is a paradox of capitalism. The concept of market-Stalinism is defined in the book as such. What we have is not a direct comparison of workers' performance or output, but a comparison between the audited representation of the performance or output. Inevitably, a short circuit occurs and work becomes geared towards the generation and messaging of representations rather than to the official goals of the work itself. This reversal of priorities is one of the hallmarks of a system which can be characterized without hyperbole as market-Stalinism. The idea is that our capitalism nowadays is bent on valuing the number on paper more than the reality in the field. A good example is how most of the countries experience an insanely good economical growth, while the population is still poor. Romania, our home country, is a good example. It is expected to experience a 3.2% rise in the GDP, but the minimum wage in Romania is somewhere around 466 euros. But after taxes, it remains 366, which is nowhere near enough to actually live. Market-Stalinism values the symbols of achievement over the achievement itself, and that leads to the same old lies that things are improving. A good parallel is with the White Sea Canal project of 1931 to 1933. Stalin wanted to create a symbol of the success of communism, so he decided that this extremely and not at all cost-effective project would do. But Stalin wanted it done and fast, so the engineers, the workers were never allowed proper equipment, time and resources to actually build something significantly valuable, so the canal itself never actually contributed to the Soviet economy. Apparently, only tourist steamers could actually traverse it. It was a brutal economical and social failure, yet a triumph of publicity. The same can be said about Canalul Dunăre-Marea Neagră, in English the Danube Black Sea Canal in Romania, which was built to mimic the Soviet one.
Astăzi va avea loc inaugurarea oficială a canalului Dunăre-Marea Neagră. Cu prilejul inaugurării acestui obiectiv de o însemnătate deosebită pentru economia noastră națională,
the principle can be applied to all the trademarks of capitalism, such as the stock market or more recently cryptocurrencies. It was never about their value, but more about the future prospect and promise of value. Moving forward, market-Stalinism implies paradoxically the same bureaucratic nightmare in capitalism as it did in socialism. Only the tools are different. In communist states, everything was centralized. All the reports from the field came to a central committee which took them and planned in theory accordingly. Capitalism sought to abolish this centralization. We are living in a controlled society, just not in the fashion we were used to. Mark Fisher notes, initially, it might appear to be a mystery that bureaucratic measures should have intensified under neoliberal governments that have presented themselves as anti-bureaucratic and anti-Stalin. Yet new kinds of bureaucracy, aims and objectives, outcomes, mission statements have proliferated even as neoliberal rhetoric about the end of top-down centralized control has gained preeminence. It might seem that bureaucracy is a kind of return of the repressed, ironically re-emerging at the heart of a system which has professed to destroy. But the resurgence of bureaucracy in neoliberalism is more than an atavism or an anomaly. As you can see, there is no freedom in itself, only that the centralization is now not done in the typical fashion, but in a more industrial form. Digitalized surveillance now is done automatically. A good example would be the terrifying working conditions at Amazon. People being fired by a robot because their efficiency on paper is not up to unrealistic standards. People risking their lives in warehouses have to do their needs in plastic bottles in a surveilled car, tracked at every moment. This is ironically exactly what capitalists seek to abolish, and yet they did it better and more ruthlessly than the communists. And this is not only affecting the working class. In his book, Mark Fisher constantly talks about this PR being more important than the actual quality of the service, even in universities. In theory, universities should be the breeding ground for the next generations of intellectuals, of mental elites and specialists. Yet both the student and the teachers are completely paralyzed. This is only the beginning, however. For the degree program as a whole, academics must prepare a program specification as well as producing annual program reports, which record students' performance according to progression rates, withdrawal rates, location and spread of marks. All students' marks have to be graded against a matrix. This auto-surveillance is completed by assessments carried out by external authorities. The marking of a student assignment is monitored by external examiners who are supposed to maintain consistency of standards across the university sector. The same can be said about healthcare. Similarly, hospitals perform many routine procedures instead of a few serious urgent operations because this allows them to hit the targets they are assessed on. Operating rates, success rates, and reduction in waiting time more effectively. In the end, a question can be asked about both these systems, so important to the population of a state. In education, the question is, are students the consumers of the service or its product? Until we can't answer it, we are all doomed to be constantly harassed by incompetent so-called elites. Universities are no longer about teaching, about experimentation. They are about money. The same goes for hospitals. The capitalist doctrine implies that everything should be treated as a business, with targets, goals, and profit as its final. This would not be so bothersome if it wouldn't be one of the biggest hypocrisies in history. Market-Stalinism is a phenomenon where capitalist systems exhibit control and only mimic the idea of competition. The failure of hierarchical structures so prevalent in communist societies has led to an intense surveillance of the working class. Richard Sennett has argued that the flattening of pyramidal hierarchies has actually led to more surveillance of workers. One of the claims made for the new organization of work is that it decentralizes power. That is, gives people in the lower ranks of organization more control over their own activities, Sennett writes. Certainly, this claim is false in terms of the techniques employed for taking apart the old bureaucratic behemoths. The new information system provides a comprehensive picture of the organization to top managers in a way which gives individuals anywhere in the network little room to hide. There are many other interesting concepts that require definitions when we talk about this phenomenon, such as the other, l'autre, which appears in Lacanian philosophy. In time, we will cover them all. We believe it is better, especially in the study of capitalism, to expose every concept individually in order to ensure a better understanding of that said concept. We wholeheartedly recommend you read Capitalist Realism, and we plan on making a video entirely dedicated to it in the future. Until then, we hope you enjoyed this video, and if so, don't forget to leave a like, share and subscribe, and we will gladly see you next time.